Hello, my name is Chuck Wolfe. Over the years, I've worked in many different roles, including leading my own leadership consulting company since 1994. I've worked for and with some of the best companies and universities in the world, and have had the opportunity to work with government officials, military organizations, and public and private schools. I'm a leading expert and pioneer in emotional intelligence. Since 2009, I have been a volunteer hosting a radio show I created called The Emotion Roadmap: Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. I really enjoy making a difference in people's lives. The show is on award-winning community radio station WPKN in Bridgeport, Connecticut. In recent years, Simsbury Community Television has been sharing my shows on their station and on YouTube. My sincere hope is that everyone who watches regularly will learn how to use the Emotion Roadmap in their own lives by listening to people who call in to get help with challenges at work, home, and in communities. To learn more, go to www.emotionroadmap.com. If you have a comment or question, email me at cjwolfe@cjwolfe.com. Thank you and enjoy the show. And this is Chuck Wolfe, and you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap: Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. Whew, there was an accident on the way into the station this morning, so made it for a very interesting, challenging time to get here. But here I am. So, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? How do you want to feel? That's what the show is about. This is the Emotion Roadmap. I'm Chuck Wolfe, the host. Give me a call if you're challenged by anything going on in your life. I help people manage emotions and help them to influence the emotions of others. By the time you finish your call with me, hopefully you're having an experience where you're walking away from the phone call feeling fine. The calls that you make are not only useful to the people listening to the show on WPKN 89.5 FM, listener-supported radio, and in my case, in my show, listener-supportive radio. I hope that in listening to the show, you find that not only do you gain perspective and ideas that are helpful for you to feel confident that you can address whatever is going on in your life. So if you want to give me a call, the number is 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. So I hope to hear from you today. It's always more interesting when people call in, but I also have some things that I like to share whenever I have the opportunity to be on the air. In this particular case, I want to talk to you about an experience I had recently going to what's called the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations. It was a chance to listen to one of the primary authors in the field of emotional intelligence who, along with his colleague, were the former directors for the consortium, and that is Carrie Chernis and Dan Goleman. Dan, if you know much about the field of emotional intelligence, you know Dan is someone that is probably the most well-known, well-published author in the field. And Dan and Carrie together wrote a book called Optimal. And it's this idea of how do you maintain performance at an optimal level. How do you do that? A lot of people talk about flow. You've probably heard the term flow from different people at different times, and you may have some idea about what that means, but I know there's a bit of confusion about that. In fact, at the conference where myself and about 30 other professionals from around the world who are really students of emotional intelligence, researchers, professors, consultants, coaches, really leading practitioners as well as leading researchers are part of this group. And in that conversation, I asked Dan if he wouldn't mind explaining the distinction between flow and optimal. Flow, as Dan talks about it, is this idea of being almost unconscious in the way you're performing. Everything is just happening in the way that you would hope that it would happen. Ideally, you're performing at a level that you didn't even know how you got there I mean, certainly you practiced, you were naturally gifted, perhaps in certain abilities, certain talents, but it's not typical that everything comes together in a perfect way, in a way where we feel like, I can't miss. This is just feels terrific. Sometimes I've heard songwriters talk about a particular song. I think Neil Young once said that Sugar Mountain came to him in 5 minutes. He just sat down one day and the words just came. They just flowed. I heard Bill Russell. For those of you that follow basketball and professional basketball, might remember that Bill was one of the people who was the winningest athlete ever, really, as far as I know, who participated in 13 seasons as one of the leaders of the Boston Celtics. He was the center. And in those 13 seasons, he won 11 NBA championships, including a few years where he was the coach. And he talked about it in a book he once wrote called White Lightning, where there were times when the Celtics were playing another team, maybe the Philadelphia 76ers or the Los Angeles Lakers, in the seventh game of a national championship game in a series. And Bill would talk about this idea of flow. It just, every time we touched the ball, it just felt perfect. We knew where each other was going. When the ball went up for a rebound, we knew which way it was going to bounce. We knew when our shots left our hands that they were going to go in when it mattered most. So flow is this idea of having this moment in time where everything is just working the way you could possibly hope it would work. So how do you distinguish that from optimal? Well, optimal is more what you can plan for. Optimal is about working at a very high level, the highest levels of your ability, in a very focused, determined way, where you've set up your circumstance so that you are not being interfered with. You're in a place that really supports your efforts, as opposed to having a place that might have multiple distractions. And you are really engaged in a very productive, meaningful time where your work effort is what you feel it needs to be. It's not the same as flow, where you feel like everything's just coming together sort of almost on its own, but really where you've planned and you've thought and you've prepared and you've set yourself up for success. And you can do this as a leader in organizations, where you set up your organization to perform at optimal levels, as a team leader, as a division leader, as a music conductor, as a coach of a sports team. You can help others to be in this ability to be optimal. I happen to be a sports fan, as many of you know who listen to the show. And again, I want to just remind everybody who's tuning in regularly that I'm really glad to be here for you, and I'm really thankful that you do get to listen. And if you've got something you'd like to say to me today, please feel free at any time to interrupt me and call 203-336-9756. My favorite part of the show is talking to the people who are the listeners in the WPKN community, or from around the world if you happen to be tuning in on WPKN.org. In any case, I'm here for you. That's why I say it's listener supportive as well as listener supported radio. We are listener supportive because we are a community-based radio station, and all those of you who are listening are part of our community. And hopefully you see me as part of your community as well. But also, there's people often who tune into PKN because they're driving through and they're not from the area, or they haven't, for whatever reason, listened to this award-winning station in the past, and you're just hearing my show for the first time. So I will talk a bit about what the show's about. To make it easy to understand, I'd say, how are you feeling? How do you want to feel? If what you're feeling isn't helpful and you want to learn how to be more effective managing your emotions and helping others with their emotions, call me. I'm Chuck Wolfe, host of the Emotion Roadmap on WPKN, community radio, listener supported and supportive radio station. And I am on the air Wednesdays from 12 to 1 p.m., the first and second Wednesdays of each month. So if you're feeling something powerful and it's not what you need or want to feel and you want to change, give me a call. And when you're done, I'm hoping you're singing, I feel fine. And I hope that everybody who listens is feeling similarly in the sense that they see that I'm helping others and they're learning how I do it. Because I use the emotion roadmap as a vehicle to guide the discussions by having a focused methodology or process or template that guides people by first asking someone, if you're going to call, I'm going to ask you, tell me a little bit about your situation. And then I'm going to ask you, how are you feeling? And if there's someone else involved, how are you and they feeling? How is the other person or group of people feeling? That might be key to what you're doing. It's important to understand that because that's where we start. And I ask, are the feelings helpful? And often if you're calling, the feelings aren't because you're sad, you're lonely, you're confused, you're angry, you're frustrated, or you're just anxious about what might happen should you actually make a decision in case you make a decision that's wrong. Or if you escalate a situation that you know you got to deal with and it's a conflict and you realize you have to somehow manage that conflict, but when you go to manage it, it escalates and gets worse instead of better. Well, I help you create what I like to call an emotion-based plan. Stopping and thinking about the emotions that are in play make a difference. It helps people to feel more in control of their emotions, more understanding of the circumstances that are causing them to feel the way they are feeling, more understanding of how others might be feeling that might be part of what's going on, and how you want them to feel. I help you think all that through. And in doing so, I hope everybody else is learning to use that kind of methodology to ask yourself, what are you feeling? And if the feeling's not helpful, what would be more ideal to feel for you and for others? And how do I get there? That's the roadmap, the emotion roadmap concept. How do I get from feeling one way that's not helpful to something more ideal for me and for any others that might be involved with what I'm trying to get done? So that's the goal. That's the goal of the show. The number to call, if you have something. By the way, I like to think that I can help people in any aspect of their lives. I tend to think of groupings in terms of there's your family life, certainly, where we're emotionally challenged often. There's your work life, where we often have some emotional situations that are extremely uncomfortable and precarious, tricky to deal with because we may aggravate or upset the wrong person that is detrimental to our careers or even our livelihood. It might be somebody that you upset that has the capacity to say you don't get to stay in that role or that job anymore. So there's high risk sometimes in dealing with tough situations at work. But there's also the community where we engage in groups or clubs or religious organizations or other community-based organizations. You might be a part of a group that does good work for the community. You might be a group that supports a volunteer fire department. There's all kinds of places where we join in the community where, again, we might find ourselves with an emotionally challenging situation. And what I do on this show, twice a month, on the first and second Wednesdays of each month, is help people work through those circumstances by talking about them and helping you create what I like to call an emotion-based plan. So, let me hear from you. If you've got something that's going on in either a community circumstance or a family situation or something in your work life that is challenging at this point and you'd like some help, my background is as a family therapist, as a leadership coach. I've been involved with leadership development for close to 40 years now. Family therapist. Did way back when, been a counselor, a therapist, and while I don't do therapy per se anymore, the work that I do is certainly therapeutic for lots of people. And sometimes some of the help that I've given people by teaching them and helping them to understand how to use this emotion roadmap of walking through how you are feeling, how you want or need to feel that's more ideal to feel, that concept of going from one feeling to a better, more ideal feeling is called an emotion roadmap. And by helping people with that, sometimes I've had people tell me it's changed their lives. So please don't hesitate to call if you've got something. I'll give you the number and I'll wait a moment. 203 336 9756. 203 336 9756. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air. Who am I talking to, please?
Hi, this is Jonathan from Long Island.
Hi, what was your first name? Sorry?
Jonathan?
Jonathan. Thanks for calling in, Jonathan. How can I help you today?
Oh, I didn't expect that I was going to get picked up. I just actually was going through the radio and I just passed on your broadcast and heard some of what you were talking about.
Well, it must have triggered something for you, Jonathan, for you to call. You don't have to share a concern or a problem, but what were you thinking when you called?
I was actually thinking about, I guess, a family issue.
Okay.
Cutting family off.
Okay.
Like a brother.
Yeah. Are you thinking about doing that?
Behavior, well, I kind of have already.
Okay.
I made that decision.
Yeah.
Communicated that to him.
And are you feeling okay about that?
I mean, I think so. I think I assume more of the disappointment that my parents who passed away years ago would feel. But, you know, I guess I'm seeing if it's okay to. If it's, if a family member's pushing you so much, is it okay to have to cut them off?
There's no right or wrong here, Jonathan. I can't tell you it's fine. I can't tell you it's not fine. I think we all have to make decisions on what makes the most sense to us. And what if you're at a place with your brother where there was circumstances where when you and he interacted, it always seemed to turn negative in whatever way you define that. And it wasn't working for you. And you tried really hard to address it. And if for whatever reason he wasn't receptive, and it just kept leaving you in a very negative place, then I think at times it does make sense to look to see about ending the relationship, at least suspending it as opposed to totally ending it. Because you never know if at some point he might come back to you and say, hey, Jonathan, I'd like to try again. I wasn't right. I was being a jerk. I wasn't who I needed to be before, and I'm trying to turn that around, and I'd like to get re-engaged with you. And so maybe you might entertain it under those circumstances, that you might rekindle the relationship.
I have done that before, which has kind of brought me to the cutting off part, because we've kind of gone through this situation that we're going through again. It's a whole family issue. It's wills and stuff like that, state. But it's more of the behavior of things that happen along the way. It's a very selfish behavior. More of a me type of thing.
Right.
Not everyone in the family sees it because he doesn't use that energy with them all the time. It's mostly towards his brothers.
So there's more of you in the family, more siblings? And so is this something that's just that you've done as opposed to the others, or is there a similar feeling amongst your other brothers about this one?
Well, that's where it gets complicated because, I have one that wants a relationship with his son, but he doesn't. I don't know if he. That's the hard part. It gets a little more complicated.
Well, let me ask you a question. Have you folks reached out to any kind of psychological support in your communities to try and bring families together?
I mean, it's somewhat. Well, we had a brother who kind of disappeared for 10 years and then came back in the last 2 years. So he's kind of distant. We're still working on that.
Okay.
And this brother didn't really step up too much when the parents passed away, so he kind of continued to
Okay.
You can see some progress along the way, but I would try to defend him when certain people would say something to him. I was like, nah, he's fine. But I've not even got to the point of not even trying to defend him anymore.
Hmm. Hey, what is your take on where you are now in terms of what would you like to see happen?
I think I'm so much more focused on doing stuff in my own life that it just felt like another right thing to do.
Was to cut this off? Yeah.
Yeah.
So your answer.
I cut my uncles off in a way too, for and no communication to them, no why, just stop answering and talking to them.
So you reached a place where you feel it's best for you to kind of isolate yourself.
I think so. I think it's time to focus on my life. I'm about to be 30 years old this year, so.
Well, that's really interesting. I think you've got a lot of years left in your life, and I don't know that you want to go through the rest of your life being isolated from family.
Well, not isolated from family, just this one person.
Okay.
I am pro-family. I'm not against my family.
And is there anything, as I asked before, where the family is trying to bring in a social worker or a psychologist, any kind of family therapist to kind of work through some of these issues? Because wills and estates are always tricky for family members, so that complicates whatever else might be going on.
I mean, that would be a possibility if they were speaking to my uncles, but not really. Mostly it's been older cousins who have kind of led the background talk. When you need someone to talk to about some of these things, you talk to them and they guide you a little bit or tell you to just leave it alone, pretend it's not there, or whatever they give for advice.
Okay, so this is kind of complex. This is not simple. It's got a lot of pieces to it. But let me ask you this, because I do have a background now, and the next set of questions is all about this concept of a roadmap. So how are you feeling right now, would you say?
I feel confident, but I definitely feel like probably focusing on myself is probably the most important thing. Not isolating myself from family, but definitely spending more time finding myself, getting away from all the politics and stuff that's been going on the last 10 years through the family.
So are you comfortable with that position? Because it sounds like the reason for your call was you're a bit questioning whether that's the right place to be.
Well, the plan is I do plan on going to therapy, and I did hear your background, so, I don't expect it's going to change everything in the moment, but,
Right.
I wanted a little bit of a proper advice from someone with a good background.
Well, thanks for saying that, Jonathan. So the the second question is, how would you really like to feel ideally? Have you thought that through at all?
I did, and I think that's probably why, because I see this person not changing so much in the last 10 years in that attitude way of selfishness.
Yeah.
So I've gone back and forth of what I wanted it to look like. So now it's just more so I'm focused on everyone else in the family. And if he's at an event, just keep your distance. And I don't expect anybody else to jump in and comfort the situation. I don't expect anyone to try to buffer. If he's there, he just keeps his distance and keeps it friendly.
So you're okay, it sounds like, with this, and you're just wondering, you're kind of passing this along to me and ask me what I think, and you're looking for some support, if you will, for that you're doing something that sounds right, at least at this level, and that you're thinking about talking to somebody for yourself to just maintain your emotional and mental health, I guess.
Yeah, I would say exactly that last part a lot.
So let me suggest something to you. If you want to feel comfortable in your own skin around this and feel supported, which is I think you do feel comfortable. You just want to feel supported too right now. Does that sound right?
I do feel a little in the dark about it. Some of the family hasn't been they say we all need to stick together and be this strong unit, but everyone has to play their part, and not everyone's playing their part.
So are you open to me suggesting an idea about how to feel supported in this and also to feel a bit better about it?
Sure.
Okay, so this is actually something that it came in a conversation with my brother not too long ago. We all got family members, some that are great and we enjoy being with almost all the time, every time. And then there's others that there are moments when things are really good and some tough moments as well. And what my brother said, I think, is worth sharing with you right now because I think it's some good advice. He said, Chuck, I've kind of lowered my expectations for certain members of the family because I've been disappointed a number of times, and then I feel bad. And yet there are other times when it's fine and we get along and it's okay. And I enjoy those moments and don't worry about the others, but aren't surprised by the others when they show up. So I know that it's not going to be perfect. I know that there are some people I enjoy almost all the time, really, and others that they're family, so I'm going to see them, just like you said. They're going to be at events. But I know there will be moments where I feel like that's not right what they just said or what they just did. But I want to manage that expectation in me and said, but it's not a shock. I'm not surprised. And I guess it's okay. It's not terrible. It's just not what I would have liked to have seen. Does that help at all?
It does. I understand the standard. Definitely trying to, I've set the standard, for my older brother who, disappeared, drug issues, blah blah blah. It didn't ruin who he was as a person. He still thinks kind of young in some respect, and he's 40. So, sometimes I'm giving him advice on stuff.
Okay.
Standards for my twin brother. He's smarter than I am. He just needs to put his mind to the right stuff and stop being so in his own head and focus on life. But this particular brother just, I don't know, the standards sometimes it's been so, which I guess in the defending him part, in certain times, and somebody would be like, he feels like he's doing this and doing that. He's not doing the right thing. I guess I would try to adjust my standards to be like, nah, he's in the trying part. He's in the, the rough part of his life. But I get the wills and estates and deaths make people do funny things, but when it happens consistently, it starts to feel like maybe that person needs to lose everything in a way, lose certain people around them. So maybe I've set my standard, I guess.
Well, this is the place. This is the place, Jonathan, where I think talking it through with somebody longer term than just you and I talking this today is probably a good idea for you to just be okay in your mind with the fact that it isn't going to be perfect for this brother and he's going to struggle and you feel bad about that, but you also at some point accept it so it doesn't drag you down all the time and anytime you think about him or happen to have a reason to be in contact with him, that you just manage to feel good about the brothers that you're getting along well with, that are doing well. And if at any time this other brother has a change, because none of you can be that old, so we go through lots of different stages in life, and perhaps at some point, I don't know if he needs to lose everything like you said, he just might need something that creates a tipping point in his life where he looks in the mirror one day and says, I don't want to be like this anymore. And somehow, somehow when that happens, that you and your other brothers and other family members and whatever friends he might have are there for him to help support whatever change at some point he might be willing to make. But you can't count on that. And so you have to manage your own relationships and your own feelings when you're around them. And I think that's what this call is about. That's what you're trying to do.
I think you're right. I think I was counting on maybe. Well, I'm counting on maybe the possibilities of the future, but maybe I just gotta let go of that hope and just focus on what's now and not put any real labels on.
Yeah, because I think every time you start to think it through, it starts to feel really disappointing and drags you down. That's the reason you're saying I got to focus on me, and I'm supporting that. I'm saying it's not just on you, so you don't have to feel selfish about it. It's just that I can't change everyone around me. I can be there though for this brother should he want to change, and I would love to be a part of that if I could help. But I'm not going to hold on to that's going to happen anytime soon. And I need to just be clear about my own life and how when the feelings come up and cause me to think about them, that it doesn't just drag me down and causes me to lose focus and get upset or whatever else that happens when you think about them.
That sounds exactly right.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does actually.
Okay, so I'm supporting where you're headed. I'm suggesting that if he ever does come and talk about things aren't quite right, let me just give you one other tip that's really for everybody that's listening. Anytime I see somebody that feels the need um, to be better or different or is looking for help somehow, before I ever offer any advice or any thoughts that pop into my mind, I always ask permission. And that's why I said to you, are you open to me suggesting to you something that I think might be helpful? Because unless I ask that, people are prepared to defend whatever it is they're doing and not allow themselves to be open to other ideas. But once you ask, hey, do I have permission to offer you some thoughts that might be helpful? It kind of like clears people's minds if they say yes. Sometimes they'll tell you no. No, I'm good, thanks. I just wanted to unload on somebody, but I don't really want to hear from anybody about what to do different. So and you don't make the mistake of going down the road where you try and offer advice and you'll end up in an argument. But it's always useful to ask permission. So if your brother ever comes, you want to ask, would you be okay if I suggested a couple of things to you? And if he's not, then you don't go there.
Yeah, I understood that.
That help?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Jonathan. I'm glad that's helpful to you. And thanks a lot for the call. And I hope it serves you going forward.
I really do appreciate it. I'll take it with me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, folks, that's how the show works. So I've got time for one or two more callers. If you want to call, the number is 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. Not everybody's problems are the same, of course, but the flow of asking, how are you feeling, after you understand what's going on. Jonathan, you had a pretty complex circumstance. It was a little hard to get everything, nor do I think I understood everything that you were talking about, but I had enough to then ask the questions about, what are you feeling? What would be more ideal to feel? And how might you get there? And when I felt like I had something that could help you get there, I just kind of suggested that rather than ask you about it. And I also wanted to allow for time for other people to call too. So 203-336-9756. I'll give you a moment. 203-336-9756. Well, at the moment, nobody's calling, so let me give you something really interesting that we were talking about in this research consortium meeting I was part of last week. One of the things that Dan Goleman, again, one of the most recognized authors in the field of emotional intelligence, he gave the group a challenge. He said, the 25, 30 of you that are here, and there's about another 15 listening online, he said, I'd like you to consider a question. What would be optimal for an entire organization? And what would make for an optimally emotionally intelligent organization? And I actually have thought about that, and so I offered this as a possibility. This is the way I've been working with a group in the Midwest. I've talked about them before, but the group is it's a trucking company, a warehousing company, so it's a working class company, probably middle size revenues, mid-size company which if you know something about business, you know what that means. I don't want to give out numbers particularly, but the idea is that they do a lot of business. They have a lot of customers. They have about 100 employees. And one of the things that we began talking about, myself and the owner of the company, is this idea of what does an emotionally intelligent organization look like? What does it look like? So for me, an emotionally intelligent organization has as its goal, as its superordinate goal, a goal that is above and beyond everything else that they care about, is to create an emotionally empathic environment where people at every level, out of every group, every constituency that the organization touches, feels cared about. Feels like their supervisors care about them, that their department cares about them, that the company cares about them, that the owner cares about them. But it isn't just that they feel cared about, it's also that they care about everybody they come into contact with. So what do I mean by that? So the big question for most companies that they always spend time trying to think, how do we measure or pay attention to our customers? So that's an obvious one that everybody knows about. How are our customers feeling? If you've been on an airline, if you've been interacting with a customer service agency for any reason on the phones or in person, or if you've been at a hotel, you will often be asked to rate the property, rate the person, rate the interaction on a low level, I didn't like it at all, to this person was great, the highest number you can give. So I imagine that everybody listening understands that. So there is a constant focus on customers. Great. But the people that actually touch your customers are your employees at different levels. In the hospitality industry, it's pretty obvious. It's housekeeping, it's the front desk, it's the bellman, it's the valet that parks your car if you drive there. It's the restaurant personnel. It's the people at the gym or the pool if you're a swimmer, use the exercise facility. It might be the people that drive the shuttle that pick you up at the airport. So there's a lot of different people that impact the customer experience. And how are they feeling about the organization's support for them as individuals? How is each staff member feeling? How is the organization making people feel that work for the organization? So if you want your customers to feel very special, it starts with your employees feeling very special. Now, that doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable. In fact, if you don't hold some people accountable, other people that work there feel like, why do I have to be accountable? The person sitting alongside me who makes pretty much the same amount of money I make, has the same title as mine, doesn't do half the work I do, and nobody's saying anything about it. Why am I working so hard? Not everybody thinks like that, but a number of people do. And so they stop working quite so hard. Or they go someplace else because they want to work hard, but they want to be at a place where everybody's pulling their weight. If they're good, they can go someplace else. So it's not about not being accountable, but it's being highly accountable, responsible, doing quality work, and being valued for it, and being appreciated, and most importantly, feeling supported. So it's the customers. Sure, without customers, we don't have a business typically. But somebody is serving those customers, and how are we treating them? And by the way, how they're treated is based on the people they report to. So the person who might not touch the customer, the supervisor of housekeeping, the supervisor of the front desk, the supervisor of the shuttles, or the team leader or the manager of these groups, they may not touch the customer, but they're touching the employees that touch the customer. So how are those people feeling? So within every organization, I advocate that an optimal organization, an emotionally intelligent organization, is paying attention to how customers feel, how every employee feels, and that's just two of the constituencies. Another group is how are the employees' families feeling. Some businesses demand that people work weekends, late nights, can't miss for certain special events in the families. Again, if you have family members who feel like I'm thrilled that their husband, son, daughter, mother, sister, brother work in these organizations, because these organizations are very special. And I know that because when family events happen, this organization makes room for the family to count and allows the person to be present at important family events. Or when family's in need and somebody's sick or somebody has an accident or something is happening that's family related, everybody pulls together and supports that person's family, not just the individuals at the workplace. What a message that sends about an employer of choice, where people are told, hey, you want to work for a great company, how about this one? They care about you there in ways I've not seen anybody else care about. So that's the family members. That's a whole constituency most people pay very little attention to. So in the trucking company, we talked about doing something like this, where truckers, as you may know, often will stop at a truck stop on a highway, and they'll sit down at a counter and they'll be with other truckers from other companies. And they may pick up business intelligence where another trucker from a different company says, you know, we're not doing so well with this such and such a customer, and I think we might lose them. So if you take that back inside to your organization and you tell your organization's marketing department and the operations managers about it, and they find ways to investigate this and landing that account that was going to leave the other company anyway, but they get it because they knew to look for it. $100 gift card goes out not to the truck driver, but in the mail to the truck driver's family, so that the family gets to go bowling or out for a dinner, a small dinner someplace. Something is celebrated in the family because the truck driver happened to overhear something that turned into a piece of business. Again, just little ways to think about how do we reward people. For the truck drivers, you may not know this, but there are truck driver days. Just like there are grandmother days, all kinds of days. I don't know if that was Hallmark's invention or whoever created all that. But there are days that are special for many different groups. But a lot of times people just ignore those days. I mean, we don't ignore Mother's Day or Father's Day typically. But how many other days do we celebrate? Well, in this case, in this company, they decided they were going to honor truck drivers by giving a small gift card to Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or someplace, or Dunkin', I guess now. But it's the idea of doing something that says, we appreciate you on a day when it's recognized. Remember, the group did this, and that a number of people who were truck drivers said, no one's ever done this before. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but it's very nice, and I so appreciate it. Again, it makes you more loyal, right? To the brand, to the company. So that's some ways to think about your constituencies, but that's just several constituencies. The two others, I think, that your organization touches. And one of them is your vendors. Now, I've been a vendor. I call on customers. I talk to customers. I spend time trying to get on a customer's calling list at the top of the list. But if you're a vendor, that person in that organization has to call their boss back. They can't ignore that. And if they have a customer that's a key customer that is one of the reasons why they can do business, they have to call that customer back. But as a vendor, they don't really have to call me back unless they need something from me. Not when I need something from them. But what if you treated vendors special? What happens when you treat vendors special? When you care about your vendors? I'll tell you. As an individual in my own company, I'll give you, I don't want to say free stuff, but I will provide services beyond what you and I signed up for that you've already paid me for if you need them. And I have the time. Because you treat me special and I'm going to treat you special. Now, I don't do that all the time, but I've actually worked for someone in a large organization who's become like a friend, who's done things for me and my family at different times. He was in the hospitality industry. He used to put us up in different hotel rooms at different places where he worked. He always had a high-level job and could do that. Well, there were times when he needed some help from me, and he didn't have the budget for it. And I said, I don't care if you have the budget for it. You do enough for me. Don't worry about it. What is it you need? And I would do it for him because I could. And I was glad to do it because he cared about me and he knew I cared about him. So vendors in small business can do that. Big business, not so much. But a big business often has deals, specials. It's kind of like when you've been to a car dealership and you find out that the manufacturer has a discount to the car dealerships. And if you're a great customer of that car dealership, they'll tell you about the manufacturer's discount. But if you're new or you don't, it's just a commodity to you and you're just looking for the best price, they're not going to tell you about the discount you could have got. But if you're a regular customer, you're great with them, and they know you care about them, and that's where you buy your cars, you'll hear about it before anybody else hears about it, that there's a manufacturer's discount or some kind of special going on that you might not have known about if you didn't treat the person right. Probably wouldn't know about, actually. Now, finally, the last one is, how about the community you work in? There are a lot of companies now that will do something for a community that they work in, but they don't often publicize it. They don't make it a big deal. So one of the things that I had learned, this is from my father-in-law a long time ago, he said, a lot of news stations, including newspapers or online journals or whatever, but people that need to make a presentation of the news every day are often looking for content. If you can come to them and say, hey, look, we've got a big drop-off of hundreds pounds of foods and gallons of bottled water to this to this shelter where people are hungry. And we're doing that around the holidays, but we're also going to plan to do that once a quarter. That we're going to ask all our people and our customers and employees, everybody that we do business with, in case they want to help support our efforts, and we're going to make sure that we go to these particular shelters once every 3 months to give them food and water that our employees and everybody else supports. And then we let the news stations know about it. And you know what? One of the local news stations put it on the air, and so many people in that company heard from others who happened to see the news that night. What a nice thing your company did. And how does that help your business? Well, first of all, everybody in your company feels great about doing it. We all feel good when we can help somebody else out, at least most of us. But the other thing that happens is, we're in a commodity business. Most of our businesses are, it's just a question of price, we think. It's not always true, but we think that way a lot. So if I'm a buyer of trucking services or warehousing services, and I realize that the company I just saw on the news has contacted me at different times, but their prices are always a little higher than everybody else, and I haven't done business with them. But you know what? I like this company. I like what they're doing here. I'm going to call them, I think, and give them some of my business, see how it goes. Because it's not going to change my lifestyle to pay them a few cents more or a few dollars more. And I'm going to feel better about doing business with them because they're a company I am really valuing based on what they say they care about and how they demonstrate that over time. So hopefully, it might generate some business for you. But you don't do it necessarily for that reason. You do it because it's the right thing to do, and everybody in your organization, everybody that's on the receiving end of those donations, feels good about your efforts. That, to me, is an emotionally intelligent, optimized organization. And I hope that makes sense to you. Let me know what you think about it. 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. I hope you got to listen to that. That was pretty good. Excuse me a second. I'm being bothered by allergies this year. I imagine some of you are as well. It's that time of year, I guess. Anyway, so the number to call is 203-336-9756. I've got a little more time to talk with you, if you like, about either a phone call or just what you just heard. What did you think of this concept of an emotionally intelligent, optimal organization? 203-336-9756. Okay, well, I don't know if somebody's thinking about calling in. I've got about 5 minutes left, so this is the last kind of shot at this. And I'll wait another 10 seconds, and then if I don't hear from you, I'll go ahead and close this show out with some other thoughts about emotional intelligence. Okay. So, as I think about what I learned and what I appreciate learning is there's some really interesting changes on the horizon. There are a number of assessments that are out there that measure emotional abilities, emotional traits, emotional social competencies. And one of the things that's kind of new in the field that is starting to happen is that while they're often very generalized, which is fine for most uses, that there are some that are being tailored to different industries. One industry, and two industries in fact, that are tailoring these assessments is one is in healthcare with a woman named Joanne Quinn and Marcello Mastriani, I think his name is. Apologize, Marcello, if I got your name wrong. But Marcello in Switzerland right now and Joanne in Florida, they are working collaboratively to look at how do we identify emotions, how do we manage our own internal emotions, and how do we manage our relationships with others. At assessments, Joanne in healthcare and Marcello in hospitality. So it's very targeted to the industries. And I think the work is very interesting. I'm actually going to do some work with one of the hospitality universities in Switzerland in August. It'll be the first time I'm doing some work with them. I'm kind of excited about that. But I'm also excited about this group that I'll be working with is creating this new assessment that's going to be tailored specifically to the industry. So it'll be interesting to see how that all turns out. So that's one of the other things that I learned that I thought was fascinating. Another conversation that we were having was about trying to project into the future about what are likely changes that are going to impact emotional intelligence and why emotional intelligence might be a key skill, because the amount of change we experience is exponential. Everybody gets that, I think, these days. The challenges of new technology. My wife just got a new iWatch with Apple's iWatches, and she's got to learn the technology, right? So that's been keeping her up for the last day and a half to try and understand all the different functions and how you move the apps or use the apps that are part of your phone and so forth. But we all have seen things. You know, I grew up, there were no smartphones. Then there were flip phones. Then there were smartphones. And now you have the world at your fingertips with your phones typically, right? You can ask anything and get information, hopefully correct information. But as we've seen with artificial intelligence, sometimes what programmers' biases are come through into artificial intelligence, where we should be just being able to get factual data. We don't always get it unbiased. So we're trying to figure out how to take the bias out. But of course, there's a lot of concern about robotics. There's even, some talk about what will life be like. I mean, right now, I remember as a kid watching Star Trek and the Universal Translator, where you'd open up this phone and somebody would speak and it would become, obviously it was a made-up language with some kind of entity from another planet. But the idea was that if it was in the database somehow, it would come out as English so you could understand it, and you could talk back to them in English and it would be translated to their language so we could communicate. Well, we're starting to have that with our phones now, aren't we? I can open my phone up and say, would you speak that language, French, Spanish, German, Russian, whatever it might be, into the phone, and then the phone translates it, and then I speak back and ask the phone to translate it to Russian, and we can have a conversation like that. Well, at some point I assume that we'll have implants that allow us to do those things without the phone. So while we worry about robotics, at some point we'll maybe be more robotic ourselves. At least that's one of the things we chatted a bit about. But what is the role of emotional intelligence? I think it's key in helping all of us to maintain our resilience and our ability to adapt, which are absolutely critical skills for what's needed daily, really, but also even more so in the future. So I'm about doing my countdown. So again, if you ever feel something that isn't helpful and you want to feel something different, give me a call. I'm Chuck Wolfe. This is the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel is the tagline. I'm on the first and second Wednesdays of each month on WPKN, listener supported and listener supportive radio. Take care, everybody.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.